Welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. I felt inspired to share some thoughts and perspective that I hope will be helpful or resonate with some of you. So let's see if I can put this into words and have it make sense. All right, so many of us know this or have heard this idea that thoughts are things, meaning that behind every form and everything is a thought. So each thing in each form represents a thought or an idea. Our personal experiences can shape the ideas we have about things, which is almost like layering thoughts upon things. And this can happen to the extent that we're no longer seeing the thing as the thought it symbolizes, but are seeing a mixture of other ideas superimposed over the thought and over the thing that we're perceiving. An example of this is we may see a nation as a mixture of ideas superimposed over the idea of that nation. We may see a mixture of past ideas that are based on other past ideas and other past ideas and other opinions, rather than the nation or the people as they truly are. So there's a universal image or a universal thought of the human form. And this is common to us all, regardless of where we're from, what we've gone through personally, how we may look or appear physically. From the absolute, we all share in one divine name, one divine nature, which is one divine image. This one divine image, or divine name, divine nature, is the true divine idea of each one of us, without all the other ideas superimposed upon that idea. This universal image or universal nature is one of wholeness. So this is really what people are trying to reestablish within themselves. In my opinion, it's getting to this like original idea that we all share, that we all have in common, aside from all of the other thoughts that we have about things. When we see from the level of the relative or the particular, we're seeing a mixture of ideas superimposed over a universal divine idea. So as we rise in consciousness from within ourselves, we uncondition our consciousness and we begin to see this universal divine nature or this universal divine image as the one idea that we all extend from, this one idea that we all share. We see it as the substance of who we all are. It's the virtue of who we all are. We realize our oneness and our unity because the universal image of us all is one. It's the same in us all. It's a universal thought, it's a universal sound, a word, an image that we all extend from. So remembering this in our day-to-day life can be really helpful. The more we choose to remember this, the more we will establish the consciousness of universal unity, of wholeness within ourselves. And this universal image is like a living universal being experiencing itself from different points of view, like a being that has faces on all sides and all directions. And as individuals, we become almost like a mirror replica of this one universal being. And from a higher dimensional state, we have faces on all sides and all directions. What is taking place within us and our thoughts and our reactions is projected onto all people and all things, and we kind of see this multi-layered experience of these ideas that are superimposed over original ideas or original universal image. When we consciously align with universal power and intelligence within us, that one universal nature and divine image, we become the image and likeness of that one image or that one nature of unity and oneness. We can then move more freely in any direction more consciously. So this takes time to develop because it's a consciousness that we reestablish by our recognition of it. First by our recognition of it, and then by our sincere interest in our daily practice, our true intentions. When our consciousness is conditioned by past ideas or limiting ideas, and when we haven't really realized our oneness and unity, it's like a light that is fixed to see, travel, and experience in a more limiting way. And when we embody this light within, the universal light, we can move from that point of wholeness. So there's more freedom in our movement in the world, in our experience in the world, from that center of equilibrium. So we become a new creation because we're no longer bound to the restrictions or the limitations of the previous state or the previous level of our consciousness. We may operate in a state that seems limiting or restricting by choice, though we're no longer bound to what many people would call like the law of karma, because it's something much different. It becomes something different from within. We become a state of wholeness regardless of where we are, and regardless of what ideas are projected upon us, regardless of how we're seen and viewed. One way of explaining this is similar to like bandwidth and processing information. There can be a time lag in processing information and a time lag in performance when there's a lot of tabs open or there's a lot of information that's being processed. And actually the eyes perceive light and imagery upside down, and then the brain processes that information and flips that imagery right side up. And I'm sure there's some information or studies that can explain this process better that takes place within the brain and how the eyes perceive light and information that's received. But I realized this from my own experience spiritually, and I was trying to put it into words, and that's just kind of how I was seeing it and experiencing it. When our whole self is integrated, we see beyond the distorted images and limiting conditions. But depending on the level of conditioning of consciousness, that timing of processing information will change. So as we're working on developing or reestablishing a state of wholeness and unity and oneness within our consciousness with a sincere intention, we're actually creating less of like a time lag in processing information and less of a time lag in performance. We become more fully connected within ourselves. But depending on the level of the conditioning of consciousness, the timing of processing information from within will change. And that changes how or what we're seeing, like how we're seeing the world, what we're seeing in our world, how we're interpreting things. And I think this may also explain why we see things differently over time. When we develop a state of wholeness by our union with this universal divine image, divine nature, and our individual consciousness, the way we interpret our experiences change because the union that has taken place in our consciousness is then reflected in our mind. So we go beyond the brain and the body consciousness to a higher intelligence that higher intelligence reflects upon the brain and the body, and that order changes. Some of you may have listened to the previous video called an energy update, when I mentioned there's a new order being established from within us, which is really the true order of things. So I'm talking about a process that takes place in each one of us and as a collective. It's as if people are becoming free of the conditioning, so the bandwidth of their consciousness can change, and the information that they have taken in about the world is then readjusted from the inside out. So the imagery flips kind of like right side up, if you will. People begin to become more positive to the supreme good, more identified with the supreme good as a truth rather than being opposed to it. It's like closing the tab so the signals can be strengthened within our own being, within our own consciousness. We then start learning in a different way. We experience something, then we may immediately receive guidance as to how to overcome that idea and to recognize if it's useful to our well-being. The subconscious mind then becomes almost like a conscious, intelligent, internal security system that we consciously interact with. It's as if it's encrypted with only good, and it's always life word, it's always for our good, always guiding us in the best direction. The confusion begins to fade, and inner peace and inner confidence develop. It's like our higher intelligence immediately responds to every thought, every image, every reaction, and we learn in the processing of that information through a conscious interaction. So previously it may not have been fully known to our awareness what was taking place within us, and it becomes more conscious. It becomes an interactive experience from within, and we learn why we are seeing things the way that we are, and we receive the best solution. It's very impersonal, yet it's personal because it's taking place at a personal level within us all. It's like a pure knowing guiding our sensing. And we then experience ourselves as really participating in our development at a different level than before. And again, this is all a process, and we all learn differently. Part of what has helped me is to speak out loud when I reflect upon ideas, experiences, or reactions. It's helpful to learn about ourselves. That's a helpful way to learn about ourselves. An example of this is seeing or experiencing something, and then if it brings up thoughts about yourself or reactions about yourself, a little bit later, reflect upon it and see why you would feel that way, if it's really true or your sincere intention. It's like seeing how our world and our reactions can influence our authentic expression and our real true connection to the inner self, rather than just reacting, blaming, or trying to imagine differently. We can use the experiences in our daily life as a way to learn about ourselves and to create permanent positive change, along with envisioning improved conditions. So rather than putting more opinions upon things or people, we can reflect upon why we think the way we do or react the way that we do. Then we can tune into ourselves and see if it's the sincere truth of our heart, if it's really what brings us more life, more comfort, more peace, and more good into our experience. The innermost self already knows the divine truth of you, and that divine truth is universal. So it's a divine truth of every person. We just recollect that divine truth and learn to express that more fully through our own individuality in a humble, loving, and unique way. This also means that universal intelligence is interested and your individual development and individual purpose as it aligns with universal purpose. Your individual well-being is essential to the universal well-being. Your individual peace is essential to the universal peace. And the essential is the universal acting from within the center of your own being, your individuality. And because it is a unity or a whole, a perfect share of universal nature, it only acts in harmony with all other individualities for a greater universal purpose. So basically, to sum it all up, the more loving we can be towards ourselves and others, the more we develop into a state of unity and wholeness in our individuality. And then we become more of a conscious part of the universal purpose. Taking things more lightly, laughing more, not being so serious or tense about life can be helpful. Reflection, speaking out loud, like reflecting upon your own inner experiences and physical experiences can be helpful. A daily gratitude or meditation practice is something I've found helpful. Sometimes we just go through changes and we need to give ourselves compassion. We just need to surrender and allow ourselves to be still. Other times we may be called to be more active. It really depends on the situation and the person. It can also take time to fully integrate and assimilate spiritual experiences and just life experiences that we may have. It may take time to interpret things clearly and see things clearly, especially what we experience beyond the intellect. That can take some time to process. It can take time to align thoughts, words, and actions when a new state is being developed, when a new state of consciousness is being established. Though if we're consistent and willing to change and sincere in our intention, then improvement is inevitable. It will be a certain result that comes about in time naturally and in its own way. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope this resonated with some of you. I love you guys, and I will talk to you soon.